Howdy once again, it's tubalcain and welcome back to my channel, Mr. Pete 222. Be sure and watch my 900 other shop videos, but the title of this video is How to Make an ALORIS Indicator Holder. As you know, from time to time we need to use an indicator, and this is the small Logan lathe, and we're setting up with a 4-jaw or checking the run out on our 3-jaw or whatever we're doing it with it. But I found that on the smaller lathes, the magnetic base type indicator is often in the way, or it's hard to find a good place for it to set with the magnet. So I came up with this several years ago, and I think they commercially make something like this as well. I never did show this, I don't believe, because I was ashamed of it. Now, I did make the dovetail holder, quite a while ago, perhaps 5 years, and I mounted an indicator on it, but I was ashamed of the setup, so I never did show it, even though I often used it. And this is used in conjunction with a relatively inexpensive import type indicator that are, they're under $20. So let's go over to the bench, and well, before we go to the bench, let me show you a couple other possibilities here. Now, I recently got a 3D printer that BANGGOOD gave me, and I'm having a good time with it. But one of the projects that I came up with right away was this indicator holder that would fit into an ALORIS type holder. Now, I'm going to have this available on Tinkercad should anyone want to make this, because it's quite usable, made of plastic, because we don't need a lot of strength here. It's not like holding a cutting tool. And that needs to be set on center a little bit lower. So anyway, if you want to make that, you can, but I'm going to make one out of aluminum in this video. And it will look something like, well, I take it back, it'll look exactly like this. It too will be held in a ALORIS holder, like that. So that's today's project. Let's go over to the bench and get started. I sourced these little indicators out at Chamfer, and I bought 3 or 4 of them, again under 20 bucks. I like the smaller size as compared to what I would call the regulation size, which is just a little bit more bulky, but of course you could redesign this for whatever indicators you have, but I recommend you go with the smaller one if you have a smaller lathe, like a South Bend, Logan, Atlas, and so on, because these are just so convenient. But let me get back, and these are under 1.5 inches in diameter. That is 1.420 is the diameter of the metal base, not the dial. Let's get back to the ones that I printed out on my 3D printer. Now, Tinkercad is the name of the modeling software. If you have a 3D printer, you're familiar with it. But you can go onto that site, log in, because you have to be a member, I guess, but it's free. It's all free. And you can do a search, and it'll be indicator holder number 1 tubalcain, and then you can print that out or tinker with it. Tinker with it means that you can alter it. This isn't the final one. Now, these are, again, are fairly robust, and if you print it out solid without the hollow infill, it's pretty rugged. That one was not the final one. There's a little bit of a change in this one, which I'll show you later, but there is a counter bore for the cap screw. And I don't know where I got this indicator. I've had it for years. I just don't remember. It's just a little larger than the Chamfer, but not as big as that Mitutoyo. So I'm not going to say anything more about the 3D printing right now, but that's up to you. And you can see that it'll fit right in there, and it looks kind of good, actually, I think. And that was one of my first tries as I work with this new 3D printer. Okay, now let's talk about the aluminum one. And these are designed around the size A tool posts. This would fit in the B, I believe, and I do have a B, but most of you that are watching this have these smaller lathes where the ALORIS is the AXA size, but you can see that fits into the standard tool holder. And although this is a genuine ALORIS Sorolla, you're going to find that these are quite cheap from Shars as an import. Perhaps $18 also, $15, $18, not very much at all. So here's the final aluminum one. Also note that that's counterboard. This took about an hour to make, but I'm still fiddling around a little bit with the dimensions. Let's take this indicator off real quick. Now I altered the design a little bit, but as an alternative to this, you can square this off. You don't really need that radius in there, but I happen to like it. But in the original Tinkercad, you can see, well, I was learning to use Tinkercad. I probably didn't even know how to do that 2 weeks ago, but I do now. So that's all just clearance. And I put more bevels on this than what I did on the final one, and you can do that any way you want. This is clearance for the plunger. Got a heck of a glare. You can make this out of steel, doesn't matter, or a piece of PVC or Delrin or whatever you got. You know, this is pretty open to redesign and to change the dimensions as you need it. I just took a short break to get a cup of coffee, and I heard the mail truck come by. It's quite loud. I've got a mailbox out in the street, so I went out and got the mail, and of course there's never any good news. So I got a jury summons, December 11th. Now, anyway, I've been on a jury 2 times. I actually got seated 2 times, but it's quite a while ago. Who cares, you're thinking? All right, let's talk about this material now. I started with a piece of aluminum, 1 inch by 2 inch by indeterminate length, and I already have prepared this off camera. That would have all been one piece, so I sawed it off 2 ways, which is quite laborious, by the way, and I machined it then to the final dimensions, lengthwise and widthwise. So what we have here, and you see I've got a living blueprint here, so I don't have to bother totally. It's 1 1/4 wide, 3 inches long, and 1 inch thick. I suppose you could get by with just 1 inch wide, you know, and change some other dimensions, but since I had tons of this in stock, that's the route I'm going. Then, to continue the living blueprint here, this hole, can you read that? It's 5/8 from the end, 1/4 inch from the bottom, and it's a 1/4 inch hole, and it'll be counterbored on the back side to suit your socket head Unbraco cap screw, whatever that depth is, and I don't remember, because you can do that at home. Alright, looking at it this way, you can see that this part here is 1/2 by 1/2, which leaves this at 1/2 and this at 3/4. Hope you can read these dimensions. The little Sharpie wanted to follow the milling lines. And then on the top side here, let's see, do I have anything on the front? I hope I have all the dimensions that I need here. This hole here is, that's not very clear, but it's 5/8 from the end. The center line is 5/8 from the end. It's a 3/4 radius, which means 1 1/2 inch cutter, but in my case I used the boring bar set at 1 1/2 inch. If you don't have those tools, square it off. Doesn't matter. Indicator doesn't know the difference. And 5/16 deep. This bevel here, it doesn't matter. It could go clear out to the end, but I made it 1 inch long because I happen to like the looks of the radius, and about a 1/4 inch across the flat. I know I probably left the dimension out. I always do. So there you got it. Orthographic projection personified. Now this is the indicator that I'm using from Shars, so there's your number should you be interested. Like I say, I bought 3 of them. There's Shars, they got a website, you know. I also bought one without the lug, thinking that I might be able to make a pocket and just fit it in without a lug, but I don't know, that was probably foolish. But there you go, it even comes with a certificate, where was it here, telling you how accurate it is, and possibly it's not as accurate as a Starrett or a Mitutoyo, but who cares, it's close enough for our purposes in a home shop. There's a graph that they ran off, I suppose, when they made it last September, so these were made just 2 months ago. Okay, so anyway, that's where to source these small ones. I love a height gauge for layout. You don't have to use one, but it couldn't hoit. This is 1/2 inch. It's set at 1/2 inch. That's my left-hander. I got a right-hander too, but you can't read the dial. If you've watched my other videos, I think you know what I mean. I'm laying it out on the ends as well. Which may be superfluous and redundant, but it doesn't cost anything. Let's go over to the Bridgeport. Okay, the work is set up in the Bridgeport, and wear your glasses. Don't spoil your day with a chip in your eye. And I have a 3/4 inch solid carbide end mill from Niagara. You remember they gave me a bunch of end mills. Do you need carbide? Certainly not, but it sure is a nice sharp one. Notice my setup. I'm high enough to where I will not run into the vise. I'm hanging over a little bit. Why am I doing that? Because at some point I can put the micrometer in there and check that. Not that it needs to be that close. I'm running this at, let's see, what, 1100 RPM. And I'll take several passes. I won't show it all. I'll just show some partial cuts here to cut the tedium and the boredom. And here's the final pass already. Notice that I'm climb milling for a good finish. And I'll check the dimensions. I'm within 3 or 4 thousandths that way, which is plenty good for what this is. And right here, it's looking good. Now I'm ready to lay out these dimensions. Got some fresh bluing. So, I'm back at the milling machine and I want to machine out this radius here, this pocket if you will. How am I going to do that? It would be so easy if I had an 1.5" end mill. I do not. I got a 1 3/4. I've got 1 1/4. I got this bodacious 2-incher, but I just don't have what I need. So I am going to use a boring bar and a boring head. That's still kind of a lot to remove because I'm going to use this in a fashion which I think a lot of people are going to object to, but I really don't care. This is the way I'm going to do it because I've already done one and it works great. However, it's kind of tedious because that's a lot to remove with a boring bar because I'm feeding in this way rather than down. So I believe that once I get this in the vise, I'm going to knock out some of this just with the regular end mill, the majority of it, and then go in and clean it up with this. But I have to center it properly, and let me tell you how I went about setting the boring bar, and that's already preset for a 3/4 radius, or should I say 1.5 diameter. Alright, in the vise we go. Okay, this is just roughing out the majority of the material. Remember, there are hundreds of different ways to perform this operation here. This is just my version of it. It could be done on a rotary table. It could be done on the lathe with a boring bar. But the first thing I need to do here, I've mounted a wiggler and I need to locate the work directly under the spindle. I've put a wiggler in place and I'm just going to find my layout line. Right there, and then I, off camera, am setting the digital readout to 0 in the x-axis. How did you set your boring head for 3/4 inch radius? This is a cheap, easy, simple, semi-accurate method, but certainly good enough for what we're doing. This is 1.5" diameter, piece of scrap, a collar of some kind, whatever, and by adjusting it and swinging it like this. I know it's baguesse and bagosh, but I've got an 1.5" diameter, 3/4 radius, and that's good enough. Quit wasting time, make some chips, you're thinking. Okay, I know I talked too much, but I've, remember, located in the x-axis and locked the table. So all my feeding is going to be done in the y-axis, and I've zeroed it out as far as the extent here up to my layout line, and my depth of cut, I don't know, 15-20 thousandths at a time. Let's go to work. And here is the very last pass. And I'm watching the DRO, not the work. And I'm done. Unorthodox, perhaps, but effective. And out it comes. Now be careful when using a boring bar, boring head, because you really can't see the boring bar as it spins around. Keep rags and loose objects away from it. Don't run your knuckles into it, or I guarantee you, you'll only do it once. Looks something like that. Now let me put this bevel on. Now I'm ready to put the bevel of the chamfer on. I'm going to run it all the way across just for variety and make it just a little wider. Do whatever you want on it. And there are scores of ways of doing this. One could tilt the head, but as you would know, I'd rather spend an hour on the stretching machine than tilt the head. You could use a tilting vise. You could use various kinds of cutters. Just a lot of different ways of doing it. This could be held in a V-block at an angle, but through the generosity of one of my sponsors, KBC Tools, I ordered this wonderful half by half 90-degree carbide. And I've been wanting one of these for a long time. They're not cheap. They run about $40. It is solid carbide, so that's going to give me 45 degrees. So let me install this and we'll give it its, well, not inaugural run. I did make this with it, so let me put it in the 1/2-inch collet. I'm ready to cut, and I always finish up by climb milling. I get a better cut that way. I do feed back and forth, but my last pass, and it doesn't have to be a very big depth of cut. Climb milling gives a great finish. Of course, this is a super sharp carbide end mill. And I can feed in this direction or up with the knee, whatever. That looks nice. Of course, it could be done on any other corners that I desire, but I like to break the corners on the belt sander, but of course you can use a file. Do it any way you want. I made a couple of modifications off camera that were required and I didn't speak of before. First of all, I couldn't put the indicator and bring it down quite far enough. In other words, the depth here wasn't quite enough, but I had forgotten about this boss right here. So I went back into the milling machine with a 3/4 cutter. I went down about 30 thousandths and made that relief. Looks kind of good too, although it will be covered up. I also made this just a little wider here on the bevel and ready to mount this right now, and that I needed clearance right here because I dropped it down a little farther, which required this bevel to be a little wider. Now, even though I have the layout line here for the hole, which is the next thing I'm going to do, and I took a little needle file and knocked off some of the burrs in here, I'm going to transfer this with a transfer punch. Then I'll have to drill it 1/4 inch and then come in from the other side and counterbore it. And the transfer punch. Well, the punch mark pretty much coincided with the crosshairs there anyway, so over to the drill press I go. This is my new Delta variable speed drill. It's an inaugural run for YouTube, I do believe. 1/4 inch. And now to counterbore that hole. And that'll be a 1/4 inch deep, a little bit more, and I've set the depth stop for that so I don't go in too deep. Now if you don't have a counterbore, just use a drill bit of whatever size that is for your cap screw, and you're just going to end up with a hole that isn't quite flat bottom, that's all. This is what a counterbore looks like close up. Perhaps you have those and already know that. Now a little bit more deburring with a fine file, and I'll remove the layout die and use my Noga deburr. Alright, I'm done. This is the original one, the living blueprint. That cap screw needs to be cut off. For that matter, so does this one. Looks like somebody did have a go at it once. Now, as far as details, notice there's a washer under there, and for some reason I like the look of a thin jam nut on there rather than a bodacious thick standard nut, but that's just personal preference. Here's some thin ones, but they require the next size larger wrench. I don't know where they came from. And there is clearance. Where's my feeler gauge here? How could things disappear? Here it is. There is clearance right here so that that knob does not interfere. Okay. The original one will go in the A size, and I'll put this one in the B size and keep it dedicated to the closing lathe. You know, I like tools dedicated. I like a adjustable wrench and a lead hammer and so on every lathe, so I don't have to chase those tools around. But here is the B size. Notice that it is a different length. Will it hurt anything? Not at all, but perhaps I should have made this thing a ½ inch longer. Let me back up here real quickly. I thought this seemed rather big and clunky to use on this indicator holder. Again, the B size, that's from Shars, but so is this one in the B size. So the 250-201 is a smaller one, and notice it has a much smaller slot in it. Now I remember buying several of these for tooling where I needed the extra space, but they're also quite a bit longer, so I'm back to using really what we would call a standard tool holder for the B size. So that's really the one that I want to use and dedicate to this indicator holder. Can you see what a nice compact setup this is? And you already have your tool post in line, so you don't have a big indicator holder. At least that's the way I feel. Maybe it's totally different to you. This is a piece of, well, it's a mandrel, so it's precision ground and truly round. A regular piece of stock may not even be round, but now if we can zero in just a little bit on that indicator, and this is a very good chuck. Now remember that this indicator here reads in ½ thousandths, so we have here not quite on zero there, just about 1 or 1½ thousandths TIR. I'm getting sidetracked because that's not really what I wanted to show you here. I'm interested in the indicator holder. Now, hang on. Don't go away, because now I have something really, I think, amazing. It's almost funny and certainly ironic. So, watch what's up next. Okay, let's have a review here. I went from this thing to a wooden model to a print, and remember you can make one of these and find it on Tinkercad, so you end up with this. Still a very usable project, and I'm going to use that one. And then finally came to this one where I made a prototype, and then the final one right here. Now in the next video I'm taking this one step further, and this is a few weeks off yet, but I will be making a holder like this that will have a dovetail. And of course the indicator, well, I don't have a loose one to show you. The same indicator will mount on here, so that you really don't need the holder and the holder, really two holders, two pieces. It'll all fit in one. So stand by for that. I'm going to show you it being printed, or possibly at least talk about it. And then, but I am going to machine one of these, I believe, out of aluminum if I have enough gumption, and you can see I've already got a lot more indicators here than what I need. But let me show you the irony now. As I was sourcing out these indicators, I looked through many different catalogs. Remember that's from Char, so I'm looking for small indicators. The bigger ones are everywhere. But of all things, I run across this, from Edge Technology. Well, then I went ahead and bought one from KBC Tools. Now, KBC doesn't show it in their catalog, but they can get them for you. Just order, I believe they're about 65 bucks. But look what is in here. By Edge Technology. I thought well, I knew I didn't invent it, but that goes right into your holder, and there you go, and boy, is that a nice looking tool. And I don't work for Edge. However, they did donate a bunch of tools to me one time. I think I've shown them. I know I've shown them. I don't know if you saw it, but this is anodized aluminum, and this part is steel. It's a particularly large dial, a lot larger than the dials that I'm using. I even like their logo. So if you don't feel like doing this or to print, there you go. For $65 from KBC Tool, you have an Edge Technology. It's really nice. Boy, that's heavy. The only thing I don't like about it is they give you this great big suitcase here that you really don't need at all. I think some of their other tools fit in this size, maybe, but that just takes up too much space. And this almost looks too pretty to keep on your lathe, so you immediately want to put it back into safety. Well, I hope you liked this video. I hope you watch the next one. Leave me a comment if you do like it. And this is tubalcain saying so long for now, and I will see you in my next video.